My name is Matthew Honeyman. I'm the IG and policy lead here at accuRx. I'm also supporting the kind of onboarding process of new users to the accuBook product over the next few weeks. And I'm delighted to say that I'm going to be joined by Dr. Lucy Marples, who's accuRx's clinical lead and the clinical lead working on the accuBook program. And you'll hear more from her later as we demonstrate the onboarding flow to accuBook and the new user flow. But before that, I'm also delighted to introduce an accuBook user. So Dr. Fleur England, who's a GP and partner at the Abbey View Surgery at Peterborough. Fleur, would you like to say a little bit to kick us off about how you are running your COVID-19 vaccination program? And just to say, like, Fleur will be kind of chipping in all the way through to talk about how she's been using accuBook, and we'll talk to her at the end as well.
Certainly. Welcome everyone. So we are part of a 12-practice primary care network. We have a central hub where we're running our vaccination clinics from, and our first clinic is starting this weekend. Over the time, we've obviously been talking about systems that we could use, and we were very keen to get using accuBook because we've been firm users of accuRx along the way. So we've already set up our first clinic, and we've got the 960 patients booked in, and it's been a really streamlined, easy process. So I'm happy to share any hints and tips, questions, and really just help to spread the joy that accuBook has been to use.
That's really great to hear, and that's super exciting as well that it's been such a help to you so far. We know the vaccine program is changing all the time. It's really important, but it is it's often feeling like you guys are hitting quite a moving target, understandably, as the situation with the vaccine program and vaccine supplies, and as well as the unfortunate situation with COVID in the rest of the country. So thank you all for joining and taking time out on that. We're here to kind of help you get set up as new users on the accuBook platform. So this is the schedule that we're going to be running through today. So the intros are pretty much done. I'll then talk through the prerequisites, what you need to kind of like have in place to kind of start the process in this webinar. Then we'll talk about the login flow, how to log into accuBook, and how to set up as a designated site. Talk more about what that means in a minute. Then talk about setting up clinics and how you to support the running of your first clinic in accuBook. And then we'll go through, and Lucy will introduce how practices who have been invited to collaborate with those designated sites can set up, and then how anyone can book in a patient either via SMS, manual booking, or the way to invite an individual patient that you haven't yet uploaded to the system. So all of this will some of these terms will become a little bit clearer as we take you through the flow if you're completely new to accuBook. And then at the end, sorry, I should have said we'll also deal with cancelling bookings. And if we do have time for questions, we will run through some of those. We'll see what comes up if people ask questions in the Q&A. And if you would also want to see that answered, click the like button next to the question, and that will raise up to the top. Can't guarantee that we'll get to those, but what we will do, I'll make sure I'm going to be available on support after this. So you can go to our live chat support at support.accurx.com, ask for Matt. We can get you started. Might be a little bit busy because there's a lot of people on here. So please don't go there yet because we will answer some of those questions for you. Yeah, so, okay. If you're completely new to accuRx, if your practice has not used the accuRx desktop toolbar before you start any of the flow that we're going to show you today, you need to go to support.accurx.com and chat to some of our colleagues. But that's going to be quite a small proportion of you, I would imagine. So the first thing that you also need to do if you already have an accuRx desktop login is go to the accuBook sign-up form and get access to it. So there is a national contract. We're not going to cover this in detail about how to get access to accuBook, but this is something that you need to do. We'll turn it on for you after you've gone through the sign-up form. It's very quick at the moment. I think it's a matter of hours before we'll enable you to access the product. but that's something that you can find out and read more about on our website on support.accurex.com. If you just search procurement there, you'll find out how to get access to it. PCNs and CCGs can go there and get access to the product. We're not going to cover that in great detail or how that the contracting works for that. It's very simple, very smooth process. So this is the standard accuBook site configuration that you'll have. I'm going to be playing the role of this user here, this little icon, who's going to be setting up who's going to be from the designated coordinating practice, setting up a designated site. So this is the kind of general model of the NHS England primary care based vaccination program, with participating practices invited to collaborate on the designated site. So these practices are all in this model, working together in a PCN grouping. And to kick off, you need to be a designated coordinating practice. And I'm going to take you through some of the things to think ahead on if you're playing that role in that designated practice, just before you kind of run through any of this. So these are the kinds of things you'll need to think about when you're setting the capacity for your site. So think ahead on this. So you want to be able to use all vaccine doses for eligible patients. You want to have a steady flow of patients across the clinic with little idle time and minimal queuing. These are all things that accuBooks can help you achieve, so that you can be a little bit flexible, adjust some of the numbers as you learn more. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about how to kind of manage the flow of patients as you upload into accuBook a little bit more. I'm going to switch to a different tab. So can you just confirm for me, Lucy, that you're able to see this?
Yep, I can.
Cool. Okay, so this is very much the right from the very get-go, how you log in to accuBook. You'll need to go to chain.accurex.com. So ignore the little chain staging in mine. This will look slightly different to yours. This is our test environment. So this is after you've got accuBook access. If you log in here, put in your details and log in here, then select the practice that you'd like to be the designated coordinating site. So in this case, I'm selecting the accuRx practice with a designation of 100. So in Fleur's case, if they were acting as the designated practice, that would have been the AbbeyView practice. So we're going to run through setting up the delivery site. To do that, you need to go to Vaccine Sessions. And this is where you enter for your first time the delivery site address. Sorry, just to say, if you can't see this, the Vaccine Sessions option, if you're expecting to be the designated site, you want to come and chat to us as a support. If you're going to be invited by a designated site, you want to go, you'll see accept delivery site request, and there'll be a little pending status for your invite. Lucy will show you that in a second. So you go here to the accuRx practice that you'd like to Vaccine Sessions, and you fill in the details of the delivery site. So I'm going to just pop in the accuRx address, so where our imaginary practice is based. It's important that you get that right. That's the information that will be provided to patients about where they need to go for their vaccination. Next, you will, if you remember our little model of having a few participating practices who are also going to be collaborating at the designated site, you need to put in the ODS code of the organization that you're going to want to enable to invite their own patients. So in my case, I've got a practice which has an ODS code of A29. It's really important that you get this right, because obviously it's not great if practices who weren't expecting to be collaborating on your on your site get an invite that they weren't expecting, and this is something that once you add them to your site, it makes clinics and appointments in those clinics available to patients to book into there, and it's something that's hard to unwind afterwards. So just double check that you're inviting the right practices. You can check this on the NHS digital provided ODS code database, which is searchable. So double check that when you're setting this up as a designated site. So we'll see what happens there for the invited practice, like on the other side, as Lucy will demonstrate later. And I think first we're going to go through setting up the clinics that you plan to run. So you want to add the details of the clinics in here. And I'm just double checking that this is still visible in terms of like legibility for my other panelists. Lucy, can you see? Okay, so I'm going to create my first vaccination session. I've got planned it in for next Tuesday between 9 and 12. And I have estimated beforehand that we're roughly going to be able to do about 12 patients per hour, which would give us obviously a capacity of 36 across those 3 hours. So when in future, when I enable this to be booked into, which we're going to talk through in a sec, that means that 36 appointments will be will be created, spread across the period of that clinic. And then at the moment, we're also, and then the next thing to do is select the vaccine. So in that one, I'm expecting a Pfizer delivery or the Courageous codenamed vaccine next Wednesday on the 20th at 9 o'clock, before 9 o'clock. And that's what we're going to be delivering in that clinic. So to set up that clinic, you hit save, and that then enables it, that then saves it into the set of clinics that are going to be run at that designated site. So you can see now that I can't edit it at the moment. I can delete it. I can click here to edit and change it, but I'm not going to do that. If I was to set it live, that would enable patients to book into. We're going to do that in a second. From here, what we're going to do is hand over to Lucy, who's going to talk through how you accept the invite to be an invited site. Lucy, do you want to take over from here?
Sure, thanks very much, Matt. I'm going to share my screen. Can you see that?
I can, yeah, it's great.
Great. Okay, so I'm bringing it back to the main accuRx login page, and as with Matt, just starting right from the very beginning. So I'm now acting as an invited participating practice. So I log into my accuRx. I'm personally associated with a bunch of different practices, but let's say it's this one. And now I can see here at the top the COVID-19 vaccine, and I can see I've got a pending request. So that's Matt's as a designated coordinating practice is invite to me. So I'll click on this, and I can see this practice. Obviously it's called the accuRx practice 2, but let's just say it's a different name for now. I can see the name of the practice, the ODS code of the inviting practice, and I can choose whether to approve it or decline it. Just a note on this, it's really important to check to not blindly accept any request, because it's a little bit tricky. You'd have to get in touch with support if you accidentally link yourself to the wrong practice. And once you have accepted a request, any booking slots that are available are then immediately available to any patients who has an active link invite. So were there to be a typo on Matt's part and he were to be inviting me from actually across the country, I'm then potentially allowing a bunch of my patients to book into the wrong appointments. So double check this. But I know it's correct, I'm going to approve it. This is just a reminder to be safe. Great, so now I've accepted it. And that means I can now see two different things here. I can see invite patients and manage bookings, so I'll talk you through that. And what I'm going to show you how to do here is invite patients, both as a group, so a mass invite, and then I'm going to show you how to invite individual patients as well and book them in. So a few things to I'll come to it later, sorry. So I'll invite my list of patients. So before I've got here, I need to have prepped my CSV file, which you can easily export from System 1 and EMIS of the cohort of patients I want to invite. And the title, the columns in the CSV file need to be here. So title, given name, family name, date of birth, NHS number, and contact number. If you do need a bit of extra help as to how to do this, there's some tips here. If you're really stuck, you can obviously contact our support team. So I'll upload one I've prepared earlier. There we go. Oh, why is that not working? Give me a minute. Oh dear, hang on. Sorry. Was working a minute ago. Let me try a different one. Matt, sorry, I'm going to have to sort this out quickly.
That's okay.
Is there anything else you'd like to talk about while
so I just want to address something that's coming up in the comments quite a bit. So it's about the configuration of the sites. So let me just take over and I will share something else with you. So this is something we were going to address a little bit later. So this is about the accuBook site configuration. So at the moment, I've talked through the existing config, so or the kind of standard setup where there's a designated coordinating practice which takes the lead on inviting other sites, these participating practices, to collaborate here. Lots of questions are coming in about whether we can support multiple sites. So where essentially you might have a single practice working at this one designated site here, and perhaps at another site here as themselves, a site like on their own patch, if you like. Perhaps because we're doing Pfizer at the central site and AstraZeneca at the participating practice, and we understand, the vaccine program may well change. We're looking to be as flexible as possible. The good news is that is coming very soon. Hopefully, it'll be available next week for multiple site options. That's something that we're making sure is absolutely available, right, and robust for you. So actually, I should show you the screen. This is essentially what that would look like. So participating practices down here can book into multiple different sites. So that will look very similar to the flow that Lucy and I just kind of demonstrated of inviting a practice to collaborate on a designated site. And it will look quite similar for the invited practices as well. You'll just have more than one available to see there. So you can just make sure that you're accepting the invitations to the different designated sites that you're going to be collaborating on. So at the moment, timelines, I see a few people asking about timelines as well. Like I said, next week, that's something that'll be coming up. And so a couple of questions coming in about if a designated site would not want to use accuBook, can they use it for their patient, as their practice themselves only, for their patients only? I think that's something that we're not necessarily supporting at the moment, just in terms of the potential for you to, certainly not something that would integrate with other systems, but that is something that depends on like local communication within your grouping. So I think that's one of the kind of like big tips from us is before you start on this, is very much kind of like ensure that you establish roles and responsibilities across the different practices. So expect, know who to expect is going to be the designated coordinating site, and then who's going to be the participating practices. So Lucy, are you smiling away? Do you want me to hand control of the screen?
No, I'm sorry about that. I worked out what it was and I fixed it so I can.
That's always good. Could you, after you've demonstrated the flow that should work, should we talk a little bit about what to watch out for with that CSV upload?
Yes. So I'll go back to showing my screen.
Cool. I'll stop mine.
Thanks for being patient, everyone.
Sorry.
So the reason that didn't work was actually a useful safety feature which is built in to stop you inviting more patients than there are too many. So I think Matt mentioned, so you can currently invite 200% of the capacity of the patients, of the slots available. And that's to stop, say, you having slots for 10 patients and inviting 1,000, and then a huge number of them will have a horrible experience and not be able to book into anything. And the patient list I was trying to upload was much bigger than 200% of the capacity. So that's what happened there. So it's actually a useful safety feature we've helpfully flagged up, hopefully. But now I will show you how to invite the list of patients with uploading the CSV file that I have prepared. There we go.
Just to say, you're not showing your screen, I don't think.
Oh, I'm not. Sorry. There we go. With me one moment. Thanks, Matt. Okay, can you see now?
Yes.
Perfect. So back to here. So back to invite the list of patients and upload the CSV file. So here's the one I was trying to upload earlier. There we go. And the patients that you'll see will be usually come out in two different categories. They'll either be patients that do have a valid UK mobile number, so they can get the invite sent by SMS, or they're patients that don't have a valid UK mobile number. So they might have no mobile number, or they might have a landline. So those patients won't, you obviously can't send them an SMS invite, and they'll need to be booked in manually. Something to flag up here, something that we found was an error last week was some practices were inadvertently having one row of their CSV wrong, which meant that all of the patient data was slightly wrong by 1 point. So what we do now is we check the CSV file against the PDS, the Patient Demographic Service, and if more than 25% of it doesn't look right to us, we flag this up and say, are you sure this is correct? Maybe you want to just double check the information on the CSV file. Because we're using fake patients here, that error has come up, but it's actually just a kind of a useful safety check. Great, so I can see my patients who will get the SMS invite. I can see my patients who I'll need to manually book in, and I'll continue. This is composing the text message that we sent to the patients who can book in via SMS. You can edit this text message if you want with some more information. And each patient will get sent an individual unique link to them. So if I press send, it will send to them. And now here I can see the patients that have had, both have had the text message sent to them. So they're the ones awaiting response. When they book in, that will go to booked. And I can also see the patients who haven't been texted because they don't have the UK valid mobile numbers. And so I'll manually book those in. A couple of things to point out on this page. I can then search for so this will eventually become all of the patients. This list here will eventually become all of the patients that you invite. You can search for these patients by name, NHS number, or mobile number. You can choose to filter to just your practice or to all of the practices in your grouping. And you can also choose to filter by status. So you might want to just see who has booked, or you might just want to see all of those you need to manually book and who have not yet booked in, for example. So Matt should hopefully be able to show you a text that to show you what the patient will actually see when they get their text message. And then I'll kind of show you that when I manually book in a patient as well, if that's all right. And then after I've spoken through how you book in a group of patients like this, I will talk to you about how you can book in just an individual patient. And that's come up for sort of ad hoc bookings last minute. There we go. So you should be able to see that. I'll show you. So that's the patient's text with the link in it, and they click on the link and then they can book themselves in. I will show you what that looks like now. So this is a patient, Fang Tuan, who I need to manually book in because they don't have a valid UK mobile number. Here's their landline, which we've pulled through there. So if you want to phone them, and I can also click this drop down to see the details of the patient here. So I can see when they've been invited by, what practice, what date, and what the status is. And I can also, this is a new feature, I think yesterday, where you can also add some booking notes. This is particularly helpful for when you're manually booking somebody in. If, for example, a bunch of administrators are trying to quickly book in a whole load of patients manually, they could type in, trying to call this patient on this day, no response, we'll try later, for example. So you know where you are, you know who's been doing what. I can choose to cancel the invite, or I can choose, and that's the same again for the patients who've got the SMS text, or I can choose to book them in manually myself. So this is what that looks like. So the patient, this is the text that Matt just showed you. The patient will get a text that looks like this. So they get a text saying, you've been invited to book in your COVID vaccination. Click on this link, and then this link will open up a page like this. So they can learn more about the COVID vaccines. That opens up to the NHS guidance. They can say they don't want to book right now, and they can offer reasons as to why they might not want to book. Perhaps they're acutely unwell, perhaps they've just had the flu jab, something like that, or they can decline booking at all if they don't want to, and then that gets coded back into their record if they've dissented to be booked. So let's say I want to continue to my booking. First of all, I'll be notified where the vaccination will actually happen. So it might be different from the actual practice. Continue to booking. The patient will have to, when the patient gets the text to book themselves, and they'll have to enter their own date of birth. But when I'm doing it manually on behalf of the patient, that's data automatically pulled through for you. So yes, I confirm the date. And then these are the sessions. So Matt's only created 1 day of booking slots so far. So there's currently only 1 date available. But let's say he'd created 5 different dates, the patients would be able to see all of them and could scroll through more options. So let's say I'm happy with this one. I continue. There's some information on why they've only had their booking in 1 vaccine, because that's a recent change. They were previously expecting to book in 2. If I actually realize this isn't ideal, I can edit my slot, or I can confirm and accept my slot. And then the patient will hang on to this text which says it's booked. If I need to go back and either cancel it or rearrange it, I can click on the link here. So once the patient's done that, they get a text message to confirm that their booking has happened. They then get a text message at 10 AM the day before their appointment to remind them to come in. For patients who are awaiting booking, so for these patients who we've texted but have, so now you can see Fang Tuan we've booked his first slot, so that's fantastic. So for this chap here, he's got the text message saying please book into your slot, but we haven't heard from him. He's done nothing with that link. We're still awaiting the response. So he will get texted the next day, so tomorrow at 10 AM saying just a reminder to book, and then 1 more day after that, the next day, saying just a reminder to book, and then after that we stop reminding them. Obviously you can book them in manually if you decide to. Okay, so I've booked these patients in en masse. Now I'll show you how to, and I've shown you how to do it manually as well for those who might struggle to do it via text. Now I'll show you how to do it to invite an ad hoc individual patient. And this is something that's coming up more and more for in particular for healthcare workers or for staff of the practice who need vaccinating, but perhaps aren't, that where they're working isn't necessarily their own GP. So I can search for the patient either by their NHS number and their date of birth, or I can search for them via this demographic information, so their name, date of birth, gender and postcode. And what this does is it looks them up on the PDS, the Patient Demographic Service. Oh dear. Sorry, I've put the wrong date of birth in. There we go. There we go. So I found this patient here and I can just book them in manually as before. If they've got a mobile number, I can send a text to them as before, or I can choose to book them in manually as I've shown you. So that's how to book patients in. Going back to the main page, here you can book your patients in, but you can also see the status, as I explained, of the patients that you've booked. You can see what's going on with them and manage them like that. I'll show you how to cancel bookings as well now. So first of all, I'll show you how to cancel an individual booking. And next, I'll show you how to cancel a whole clinic, which obviously might need to happen quickly because of supply chain issues and so on. So I can either choose to cancel an invite. So here are the 2 patients that I've sent a text to. I can choose to cancel that invite. There, it says, are you sure? And I say yes. Or I can choose to cancel this chap's actual booking. So again, it says, are you sure? Now, if there's a box here for all cancellations where if you keep it ticked, the patient will then have the option to book into another slot when it becomes available. Or I can choose to untick it and they can't they don't have the option to book again. So I'm cancelling that. There we go. And so now you can see it's cancelled and it's cancelled. So that's how to cancel individual patients. In order to cancel a clinic, what I'll do is I will show you, I'll have to go back to the practice which has actually booked clinics. So I go to my booked list, and this is how I view all of my different clinics that have been set up. So here are the different dates. So I'm going to find a clinic which actually has patients booked into it. So this one. I go to open clinic, and at the top here of my URL, this number here, the last two numbers, is the clinic ID. So I copy that down. I go back to managing my booking. And I can search for my clinic. Oops. So I type in clinic ID and then the number of the clinic I've just found. Oh, have I not done that correctly? Sorry. There we go. So I typed in the clinic ID, and these are all the patients booked into that clinic. So I can then choose to cancel their bookings individually. And I'll also need to go back, if I want to cancel the clinic in its entirety, the designated coordinating site will need to actually cancel the clinic from the page that Matt showed you initially to unpublish the clinic and stop it being live. So that should all make sense. So I've shown you how to invite patients en masse, how to invite patients individually, how to review their bookings, see if they're booked in, they need to be booked in, how to cancel them individually, and how to cancel them, how to cancel a clinic en masse. As Matt said, any questions, and he will be on support after. And I'll hand back to you, Matt. Thanks.
Cool, thanks. I just wanted to bring in Fleur. So you were one of the participating practices, is that right? So you received the invitation. Just talk us through a little bit about how it helped you through the different flows that Lucy's taught us through.
So I think, first of all, the most important thing is it's so simple to use. I mean, the user guides on there are very easy, but from within 2 minutes of us confirming with our PCN that we had a confirmed delivery date, we'd created our CSV file of the patients that we wanted to use. We'd got them on there and we were already ringing up. And that was without looking at a user guide, having looked at how to do it. And it was just very counterintuitive. That was very simple to do. We've come across a few little tweaks along the way that we've just done it to make life a little bit easier for ourselves, which I'm happy to share. And I think a lot of practices will be in the position where, although in their PCN they have a certain amount of vaccines for clinic, they are only being allocated that certain amount. For example, our first clinic, we were only allocated 53 vaccines. So for us, initially, we certainly found it easier to amend our search in our clinical system and actually create the CSV of just that amount of patients initially, just so it was easier to keep a track on those that you have invited.
Yeah.
One thing we haven't mentioned yet is the fact that the accuRx text will then, I think in EMIS, correct me if I'm wrong, in EMIS Web, but maybe not in System 1, do they then code into the records that they've had an invite?
Yes, so I've actually answered this as one of in the text chat. So it saves back to record the fact that a COVID-19 vaccination text has been sent, the invitation text, and whether someone has declined that text as well.
So the difficulty is at the moment, as most practices will probably find, with the current age group that we're running with, most of them will be manual invites because they won't have mobile phones on their notes. We have found it easier before we've uploaded the CSV files into accuRx to separate them into those with mobiles or not mobiles. The reason being, we can batch add the invite code straight into the clinical system before we've even got to accuRx for those that we know have no mobile telephone number. That means using your Ardent searches or your clinical system searches means that you're already one step ahead and you're not going to have to look back at another system to check whether they've had an invite. So practices might initially, for the older age groups, find that helpful as well.
Yeah, that's really helpful. We're looking at ways of tracking and establishing whether someone has had a vaccine all the time. There's another support article on support.accuRx.com that talks about second doses, because obviously many practices across all practices across the country are following closely on what's happening with the instructions about second doses and reinviting patients back after 12 weeks. We took out the ability to book in a second dose just so that we can make sure that we work on a solution about reinviting people back, and that's like the team's top priority at the moment. An ideal situation would be where we could verify with the National Immunisation Management Service or some other service that a patient has indeed had their first jab, so that we can enable the second booking to be booked through accuBook, whether you're coming from another system or not. So that's the ideal world that we'd like to get to. There's a few other dependencies, but those who did book in their second jab on accuBook the first time round and had it cancelled, all of those are tracked. The issues will come if, for example, someone created their first jab in a different system and then moved to accuBook afterwards. Those things will have to be tracked manually for the moment, but we're looking to have a smooth solution by the time that 12-week window closes, or certainly long before then. So just to say that as well. So thank you, Fleur. Sorry to cut across you. I just wanted to share there. And one of the kind of the other points that you made there about I think basically like it sounds like your practice had, or your group had shared out that the vaccine in some equitable way across the group.
Yeah, just as a way, and I think it will be easier as there's a larger volumes of vaccine that are offered to each practice, and also you get more familiar. But I think in the early days, as you said, if you're inviting your first few patients, get used to it and perhaps keep your CSV file as a smaller amount rather than a larger amount, because it makes it much easier to keep a track of, if you know you can only allocate 56 vaccines to the first session, it's much easier to do that if you've uploaded a CSV file of 56 and then add to it, rather than uploading a CSV file of 380 patients and then trying to keep track of where you are. So I think starting small initially, just till you've got your training wheels on, just helps a little bit.
So just to reiterate as well, so Lucy did talk about some of the kind of big capacity constraints that are kind of hard coded into the solution, into the platform. So there's the 200% of your capacity of your clinics, which is actually the error that we hit earlier in this demo, which was very much my fault for completely wiping the demo environment and having no clinic capacity to book into. So you can only invite enough patients under 200% of the capacity of the available slots. So for example, I think I had about 10 in that first one, and that's why Lucy hit that error with that CSV upload. Yeah, that's a hard coded in, but there's a lot more that you can do to kind of just make sure that you start slow, try a few things like manual booking first, and just keep coming back to this when you get new supply, basically. So don't just think it's something you can upload all of your patients to. Those cohorts are changing.
And it's very easy. So what I did while Matt was filling time was I quickly upped the capacity of the session that he'd created. So that's how quick and easy it is to do. You just go to edit the session and you type in the new capacity. So it's definitely better to start small, and it's very, very quick to up the capacity if needed.
Yeah, there are a few. Sorry, go on, Fleur.
To say that just as a participating practice, though, just remember that your other participating practices wouldn't be very happy if you suddenly invited your 200% capacity when you were only allocated 50 vaccines. So just don't make enemies with your own PCN.
So exactly that. It's just making sure there's that communication across the grouping is really important too. I was going to actually demonstrate one final thing, which is what I think you'll see. So just this is what you'll see on Saturday, Fleur, if you use the book to list view. So this is something that you'll be able to see after inviting patients and setting up your practice, as we've run through in the demo. But this is essentially a view of all of the patients who have booked in to the COVID-19 vaccine. And I'm going to do it with a few sessions that we have made earlier. So you can open the clinic here. I'm going to open the clinic that ran on Friday the 22nd of January 2021. And here we can see the clinic times, the appointment times rather, and information about the patients. So I can mark them as arrived and can look at the treatment screen as well, although that's something that I don't think will be available just yet. So you can mark them as arrived and also indeed export here you can export for each given clinic a list of the patients who are booked into it as well. So that's something that is also available. You can look at that booked list view. It's something that we hope will be of use to you on when running your sites, and another area we're improving the product all the time.
Sorry, Matt, just a quick, if I may ask just a quick question on that. Presumably to even use that booked clinic view, you still need to be attached to your clinical system.
No, it's just, so at the moment it's just a simple kind of readout of everything that got booked into every patient that was booked into a given clinic. I know people are using it in various different ways at the moment, just to kind of like as an understanding of who's likely to come through the door. A couple of questions came in about whether you have to mark someone as arrived in there. It's not necessarily a requirement at the moment. We're an appointment management system. Ideally, I think if people were tuned into early webinars in the development, as we talked through the development of accuBook, we talked about being able to be a point of care solution as well. At the moment, you guys have to use Pinnacle, my understanding is. That's something at the moment it's just Pinnacle. So that's where we stop and you have to kind of take over there. So however people would like to use that, we're trying to make that as easy as possible. So feedback welcome. But that's where the booked list comes in. So you can see who's coming in on a given day after you put them in. Lucy, was there anything else to cover there on that one?
Getting a few, not on that one, but we're getting a few questions about coding back to the record. So I just want to be explicit on that.
That's great.
So we currently code to EMIS practices. System 1 is coming within the next few days, so imminently. And the two things that are coded are that the invite has been sent, and that's coded when the SMS text goes through or when the patient is booked in manually. Also, the second thing that's coded is if a patient declines, so they either decline by pressing decline on their text, or you can decline on their behalf manually for them. However, at the moment, this will only be coded to the record if the practice inviting the patients is the same practice who kind of owns those patients. So if somebody is inviting another practice patients, that won't get coded to the record.
Okay, that's really helpful, really clear, Lucy. Fleur, I just wanted to give you the last word if you have anything more to add, what you're thinking about ahead of Saturday in your first clinic.
No, I just think having spent quite a bit of time in webinars and looking at different booking systems, I think if anyone's still debating, all I can say is just from first-hand experience, with enough that we're going on with everything else at the moment, this really does make it nice, simple and easy, and is kind of everything that you would expect from something that comes from accuRx, really. It's easy to use.
Great. So that's really heartening to hear. We know you guys are working incredibly hard at the moment across the vaccine program. So thank you all for joining and listening to this, and hopefully it's helped you get started on accuBook. There's a lot of questions in the Q&A, so we're not going to be able to come to all of them on this video, but what we will, as I said, I'll be available on support.accurx.com after this. I'll also go through some of these and message you individually if you left your registration details, if there's things to pick up with you, if we hadn't covered them here. So for more support, you can go to support.accurx.com and look at the extensive library. I think we're up to 30 articles about how you can use accuBook in various different ways, lots of different scenarios to support there. The recording of this webinar, if other people you know are setting up accuBook for the first time, say you've invited a bunch of participating practices, send them this so you can go to that information should be on the screen right now. And I don't think I've forgotten anything apart from to say, yeah, stay safe. Thank you all very much for joining, and best of luck with this program. I think the final plug actually that I have forgotten to do is go to the Facebook group as well, join the accuRx community on Facebook. It's super helpful to hear all your bits of feedback, what you're facing, not just in the vaccination program, but in general practice as well, and in wider primary care and across the system. So you can also meet other people there to share top tips about how to use things like accuBook and the accuRx system. So I do go there. Lucy, Fleur, thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, thank you to all of you who've participated in the webinar. We're going to leave it there. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers.